The worn-out boots of Captain Daniel Carter echoed on the creaky porch of a weathered Victorian house in Cedar Falls, Iowa. His duffel bag, still smelling of desert sand and gunpowder, hung heavily from his shoulder, but its weight was nothing compared to the knot in his chest. 2 tours overseas, and now he was back to reclaim the life he'd left behind, or what was left of it. This was the home of his late wife Emily, and where his 9-year-old daughter Lily now lived with her stepmother Rachel. The door swung open before his third knock landed. Rachel stood there, her auburn hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her eyes widening for just a second before she schooled her expression. "Daniel, when did you—" "Just got in," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Wanted to surprise Lily." Rachel hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled of stale air and lemon cleaner, the curtains drawn so tightly that the living room felt like a tomb. Dust motes floated in the sliver of light that dared to intrude. Family photos lined the mantel, Lily's gap-toothed grin, Emily's laughter frozen in time. It was a museum of ghosts. "She's in the kitchen," Rachel said, already turning. Daniel shook his head. "I'll go." The kitchen was dim, the only sound the scrape of a broom against linoleum. Lily, smaller than he remembered, her honey-blonde hair tangled, was sweeping dust into a pile. She wore an oversized t-shirt that swallowed her frame, her arms moving mechanically. When he said her name, she turned, but the spark he'd hoped to see in her eyes was gone. Instead, she gripped the broom handle tighter, her gaze skittering away. That's when he saw them. Angry red welts snaked up her arms, some scabbed over others, fresh and glistening. They weren't mosquito bites or poison ivy. The patterns were deliberate, almost like symbols. "What happened to your arm, sweetheart?" Daniel kept his voice low, but Lily flinched, tucking her hands behind her back. Rachel materialized at the sink, scrubbing a plate with unnecessary force. "Allergies," she said without looking up. "The doctor said it's just eczema." Daniel said nothing. The lie hung between them, thick as the humidity clinging to the walls. Later, after a dinner so silent he could hear the clock ticking, Daniel carried Lily upstairs. Her room smelled of bleach and something sour beneath it. As he tucked her in, she whispered, "Daddy, the thing's under my pillow. They talk to me at night." His blood ran cold. Before he could ask, Rachel's shadow filled the doorway. "She's been having nightmares," she said, her voice too light. "Too much sugar before bed." Daniel pretended to buy it. But when the house fell asleep, he lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening. Then footsteps. Too deliberate to be Lily's, too quiet to be Rachel's. They stopped outside Lily's door. A click, a creak, and then the whispering began, not the imagined kind. Real guttural words in a language that made his skin crawl. Daniel was on his feet in an instant, but by the time he reached Lily's room, the door was shut, the whispers gone. Only the faintest smell remained, sulfur and wet earth. Rachel stood at the end of the hall, her face unreadable in the dark. "You should rest, Daniel," she said. "It's been a long day." But as he turned, he caught the flicker of something in her eyes. Not concern, fear. And suddenly Daniel understood. The marks on Lily's arms weren't allergies. The whispers weren't nightmares. Something in this house was very, very wrong, and Rachel knew exactly what it was. Captain Daniel Carter sat frozen in the dim glow of his phone's flashlight, his breath shallow as he stared at the nightmare beneath his daughter's pillow. Dozens of bulbous crimson creatures writhed in a slick of glowing fluid, their bodies pulsing like tiny engorged hearts. But it was the syringe half hidden in the folds of the sheet, its needle still glistening with that same unnatural red that sent ice through his veins. Someone had injected these things into Lily. He barely registered the soft whimper from the bed. Lily was stirring again, her small fingers clutching the blanket as she muttered, "No more. Please, no more." In her sleep. Daniel's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a nightmare. It was a plea. Carefully, he wrapped the syringe in a handkerchief, his mind racing. Rachel's voice floated up from downstairs, humming some half-familiar tune. Too calm, too normal. The next morning, sunlight did nothing to soften the shadows in the kitchen. Rachel stood at the counter pouring coffee with steady hands. "Sleep well?" she asked, not meeting his eyes. Daniel took the mug, his grip deliberate. "Lily's teacher. I want to meet her today." Rachel's spoon clinked against the ceramic. "Oh, that's not—" "I wasn't asking." His tone left no room for argument. A flicker of something panic crossed her face before she forced a smile. "Of course. She's at Cedar Falls Elementary. Mrs. Alvarez." Daniel nodded, but his attention snagged on the medicine cabinet behind her. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, nestled among aspirin and allergy pills, was a small vial of crimson liquid, the same shade as the creature's. Rachel followed his gaze and moved, blocking his line of sight with a sudden step. "We should leave by 9, she said briskly. "Who's The school was a blur. Daniel barely registered the brightly colored posters or the squeak of sneakers on linoleum. Mrs. Alvarez, a warm woman with kind eyes, smiled as she shook his hand. "Lily's a joy," she said, "though she's been tired lately." Daniel leaned in. "Has she mentioned anything about home, about her arms?" The teacher's smile faltered. "She said they were special marks from her stepmom, that Rachel was making her stronger." The words hit like a bullet. Before Daniel could react, his phone buzzed. A notification from his security app motion detected in Lily's room. The camera feed showed Rachel standing over their daughter's bed, lifting the pillow with trembling hands. And beneath it a fresh swarm, their bodies bigger now, their glow brighter. Daniel was already running for the door. Back at the house, the air was thick with the scent of burning sage. Rachel stood in the hallway, her back to him, whispering words that didn't sound like English. "What did you do to her?" Daniel's voice was a blade. Rachel turned, slowly. In her palm, one of the creatures pulsed, its tendrils curling around her fingers like a living tattoo. "You wouldn't understand," she said softly. "This is how we keep her safe." Then the creature moved, slithering up her wrist, and her eyes flashed the same unnatural red. Daniel's hand went to his sidearm. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battleground. Daniel's fingers trembled slightly as he replaced the notebook in Vanessa's desk drawer. The words, "F3 strong reaction, 8 years old, tolerates low dosage," burned in his mind like acid. He pulled out his phone, snapping one last photo of the room's layout. The medical textbooks, the locked cabinet behind her desk, the faint smear of reddish residue on her keyboard. Then he heard it. The creak of the front door. Vanessa was home early. Daniel moved like shadow, slipping into the hallway just as the grocery bags rustled in the kitchen. He forced his breathing steady, his combat instincts taking over. "Need help with those," he called out, stepping into view. Vanessa jumped, nearly dropping a carton of eggs. "Daniel, you startled me." Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward her office. "I didn't realize you were still here. Just catching up on emails." He lied smoothly, taking a bag from her. His fingers brushed hers, and he recoiled inwardly at how cold her skin felt. "Ellie's upstairs napping." Vanessa nodded, but her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. "You look tense. Everything okay?" Before he could answer, a muffled thud came from upstairs. Ellie's room. Daniel was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into her room to find her curled on the floor, her nightgown soaked in sweat. The pillow lay flung across the room, its underside exposed and crawling with those things, their bodies now swollen to the size of grapes, their glow pulsing in the dim light. Ellie whimpered, clawing at her arms. "They're inside me," she gasped. "I can feel them." Daniel dropped to his knees, pulling her close. His hand brushed her back, and beneath her skin something moved, a ripple like liquid shifting. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her breath ragged. "It's just a fever," she said, but her voice wavered. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small vial of that same crimson liquid. "This will help." Daniel was on his feet in an instant, knocking the vial from her hand. It shattered against the floorboards, the liquid hissing as it ate into the wood like acid. "You bitch!" he snarled. Vanessa's face twisted. "You don't understand. They chose her. The F3 strain bonds best with children. It's progress." A guttural noise escaped Daniel's throat. He lunged for her, but Vanessa was faster. She yanked something from her sleeve, a syringe already filled with that glowing red poison, and stabbed it toward his neck. Daniel dodged, but the needle grazed his shoulder. Fire erupted under his skin. He staggered, vision blurring as Vanessa bolted from the room. Somewhere distant, Ellie screamed, and then silence. Daniel's knees hit the floor. The room spun, but one thought cut through the haze. Get to the car. Now. Gritting his teeth, he hauled Ellie into his arms. Her body was burning up, her breaths shallow. As he stumbled down the stairs, his phone buzzed an alert from the security app. The front door camera showed Vanessa sprinting down the street, a black SUV screeching to a stop beside her. And on its door, clear as day, was the same spiral logo from the Biogen research box. Daniel's vision tunneled. He barely made it to his truck before the world went black. The last thing he heard was Ellie's voice, small and broken. "Don't let them take me, Daddy." Daniel's fingers trembled slightly as he replaced the notebook in Vanessa's desk drawer. The words, F3 strong reaction, 8 years old, tolerates low dosage, burned in his mind like acid. He pulled out his phone, snapping one last photo of the room's layout. The medical textbooks, the locked cabinet behind her desk, the faint smear of reddish residue on her keyboard. Then he heard it, the creak of the front door. Vanessa was home early. Daniel moved like shadow, slipping into the hallway just as the grocery bags rustled in the kitchen. He forced his breathing steady, his combat instincts taking over. "Need help with those?" he called out, stepping into view. Vanessa jumped, nearly dropping a carton of eggs. "Daniel, you startled me." Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward her office. "I didn't realize you were still here." "Just catching up on emails." He lied smoothly, taking a bag from her. His fingers brushed hers, and he recoiled inwardly at how cold her skin felt. "Ellie's upstairs napping." Vanessa nodded, but her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. "You look tense. Everything okay?" Before he could answer, a muffled thud came from upstairs. Ellie's room. Daniel was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into her room to find her curled on the floor, her nightgown soaked in sweat. The pillow lay flung across the room, its underside exposed and crawling with those things, their bodies now swollen to the size of grapes, their glow pulsing in the dim light. Ellie whimpered, clawing at her arms. "They're inside me," she gasped. "I can feel them." Daniel dropped to his knees, pulling her close. His hand brushed her back, and beneath her skin something moved. A ripple like liquid shifting. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her breath ragged. "It's just a fever," she said, but her voice wavered. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small vial of that same crimson liquid. "This will help." Daniel was on his feet in an instant, knocking the vial from her hand. It shattered against the floorboards, the liquid hissing as it ate into the wood like acid. "You bitch!" he snarled. Vanessa's face twisted. "You don't understand. They chose her. The F3 strain bonds best with children. It's progress." A guttural noise escaped Daniel's throat. He lunged for her, but Vanessa was faster. She yanked something from her sleeve, a syringe already filled with that glowing red poison, and stabbed it toward his neck. Daniel dodged, but the needle grazed his shoulder. Fire erupted under his skin. He staggered, vision blurring as Vanessa bolted from the room. Somewhere distant, Ellie screamed, and then silence. Daniel's knees hit the floor. The room spun, but one thought cut through the haze. Get to the car. Now. Gritting his teeth, he hauled Ellie into his arms. Her body was burning up, her breaths shallow. As he stumbled down the stairs, his phone buzzed an alert from the security app. The front door camera showed Vanessa sprinting down the street, a black SUV screeching to a stop beside her. And on its door, clear as day, was the same spiral logo from the Biogen research box. Daniel's vision tunneled. He barely made it to his truck before the world went black. The last thing he heard was Ellie's voice, small and broken. "Don't let them take me, Daddy." Daniel's grip on Ellie tightened as the sirens wailed closer. The federal agents exchanged a glance, too quick, too knowing. Something was wrong. Vanessa didn't react like a cornered criminal. She smiled. "Too late," she whispered. The windows exploded inward. Shards of glass rained down as black-clad figures rappelled through their helmets, sealed their visors, reflecting the terrified faces in the room. Not police, not FBI. Their uniforms bore the same spiral logo from the biogen boxes. Agent Davis went for his gun, then collapsed, a dart protruding from his neck. Dr. Black shoved Ellie and Daniel toward the hallway. "Run!" Ellie screamed as one of the intruders lunged for her. Daniel swung her onto his back and bolted bullets, chewing the wall beside his head. The bathroom, the window. His only thought. Vanessa's laughter chased them. "You can't outrun them, Daniel. They're everywhere." He kicked the bathroom door shut just as something heavy slammed against it. The window was still broken from his escape last night. He hurled Ellie through, first her small body vanishing into the bushes below. A hand grabbed his ankle. Daniel turned to see a masked figure dragging him back, the man's breath fogging his visor. Through the plastic, Daniel saw the same red veins creeping around the man's eyes, pulsing in sync with Ellie's markings. They're infected too. Daniel stomped on the man's wrist, feeling bones snap. He didn't wait to see the fallout. He jumped. Cold air whipped past as he hit the ground, rolling. Ellie was already running toward the woods, her nightgown fluttering like a ghost. Daniel sprinted after her, but something made him glance back. The house was burning. Orange flames licked the windows as figures moved inside, not fleeing. Dancing. Vanessa stood framed in the doorway, her arms raised, her mouth moving in a chant drowned by the roar of fire. Then the ground shook. From the basement, something surged through the floorboards, a wave of those crimson creatures, thousands of them seething toward the trees. Toward Ellie. Daniel grabbed his daughter and ran faster. Behind them, the night filled with a sound like 1,000 wet mouths opening, and then a voice clear as a bell through the chaos coming from Ellie's own lips. "We see you." It wasn't her. The thing inside her was waking up, and it was calling its brothers home. Daniel's world narrowed to the sound of Ellie's failing heart monitor. The machine screamed as her small body convulsed, her veins now glowing a sickening crimson beneath her skin. He clutched her hand, burning hot, then freezing cold, as doctors swarmed around them. "Get back!" Dr. Black barked, jamming a syringe of milky liquid into Ellie's IV. No effect. The red lines spread faster, branching across her chest like lightning. Then her eyes flew open, completely blood red. A guttural voice deeper than any child's tore from her throat. "Harvest incomplete. Initiate phase 2. The lights exploded in a shower of sparks. Daniel barely had time to shield Ellie as the quarantine room's glass walls shattered, not from impact, but from inside, thousands of those engineered creatures pouring out of Ellie's pores, forming a writhing, pulsating shield around her body. Diana West drew her sidearm. Containment breach locked down the Rion Furade. One of the creatures launched itself at her face. She fired the bullet, tearing through it, splattering acidic red fluid across the wall. Where it landed, the steel melted. Ellie's body levitated off the bed, suspended in a cocoon of swirling red tendrils. The heart monitor flatlined with a deathly whine. Daniel didn't think. He moved. Ignoring the searing pain as the creatures bit into his arms, he plunged through the swarm and grabbed Ellie. Her skin was like fire, but he held on. "Fight it, baby," he begged, pressing his forehead to hers. "Daddy's here." For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then Ellie gasped. The red veins retracted, slithering back into her skin. The creatures dropped to the floor, lifeless. The monitors stuttered, then beeped once, twice. A steady rhythm. Silence. Dr. Black stared, his stethoscope dangling uselessly from his neck. "That's medically impossible." Diana wiped blood from her lip, her gun still trained on Ellie. "No, it's exactly what they wanted." She turned to Daniel, her eyes haunted. "Your daughter isn't just a test subject. She's the key." A phone rang. Diana answered, listened, then went pale. Vanessa's escaped custody. Outside the shattered windows, the night sky pulsed with distant red lights, helicopters converging on their location. And from Ellie's lips, barely a whisper. "They're coming." Daniel scooped her up. The time for answers was over. Now they ran. Daniel lay motionless as the machine hummed beside him, his blood flowing through tubes into the centrifuge. The sterile white walls of the lab seemed to pulse in time with the rhythmic whir of the equipment. Every second felt like an eternity. Then the door burst open. A nurse stumbled in, her face ashen. Dr. Black, the samples, they're changing. Diana and Dr. Black rushed to the microscope. What should have been a routine immune cell transfer had turned into something else entirely. The red fluid from Daniel's blood wasn't just neutralizing the toxin, it was attacking it, dissolving the foreign organisms with terrifying precision. But that wasn't the shocking part. Under the microscope, Daniel's cells morphed, rearranging into complex geometric patterns identical to the symbols Vanessa had scrawled in her notes. "Impossible," Dr. Black whispered. "This isn't just immunity, it's programmed." Diana's head snapped toward Daniel. "Harper, what aren't you telling us?" Before he could answer, Ellie's scream tore through the facility. Daniel ripped the IV from his arm, blood dripping down his wrist as he sprinted back to her room. The sight that greeted him froze his blood. Ellie floated 3 feet above the bed, suspended in a swirling vortex of crimson mist. The machines around her sparked and dyed, their wires snapping like whips. The red veins on her skin had formed intricate glowing symbols, the same ones now visible on Daniel's own arms where the IV had been. And her voice, when she spoke, it wasn't hers alone. "Activation sequence complete." The quarantine glass exploded outward as an invisible force slammed into the room. Daniel was thrown against the wall, the breath knocked from his lungs. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Diana shouting into her radio. "Code Black, I repeat, Code Black. The subject is—" Her words cut off as Ellie's small hand twitched. Across the facility, every light winked out. In the darkness, only the glow of Ellie's markings remained, and the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps approaching from the hallway. A familiar voice echoed through the blackness. "Hello, Daniel." Vanessa stepped into the dim red light, her eyes now matching Ellie's unnatural glow. "You didn't really think it was me they wanted, did you?" She smiled, her teeth gleaming too sharp in the eerie light. "It was always you." The truth hit Daniel like a bullet. The bugs, the injections, the experiments. They hadn't been testing Ellie. They'd been using her to awaken something in him. And now it was too late to stop it. Daniel's hands clenched into fists as the truth unfolded on the screen before him. The sterile conference room air grew thick with the weight of revelations. "Show me, Knox," he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Diana tapped the screen. A photo appeared, a gaunt man with piercing gray eyes and a clinical smile. Dr. Harold Knox, former director of Biogen Research Solutions. "He disappeared 3 years ago," Diana explained. "Officially, he's dead, but our intel suggests otherwise." The screen changed again, displaying security footage from an underground lab. Knox stood beside a row of glass tanks, each containing a child suspended in glowing red fluid. Jack's blood ran cold. Ellie's file appeared once more, zooming in on a single line. "Subject EH exhibits unprecedented cellular adaptation. Prime candidate for Phase 3. A sudden alert blared through the facility. Red lights flashed as a voice crackled over the intercom. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel." The transmission cut off with a burst of static. Diana's radio erupted with panicked voices. "They're inside, they're gunfire, screams." Then silence. The conference room door exploded inward. Black-clad figures stormed in their helmets, sealed weapons raised. Not military, not law enforcement. Their armor bore the same spiral logo. One stepped forward, removing his helmet. Harold Knox smiled. "Hello, Jack. I've been waiting for this." His gaze flicked to the live feed of Ellie's hospital room on the monitor. "Your daughter is quite special, but you're the masterpiece." Daniel moved on instinct, tackling Knox to the ground. The room erupted into chaos, gunfire, shouting. Diana went down, clutching her shoulder. Through the smoke, Daniel saw Knox's smile never waver. "You don't understand yet, do you?" Knox whispered, blood trickling from his lip. "Those markings on your arms, they're not from Ellie's transfusion." He grabbed Daniel's wrist, forcing him to look. The symbols had spread, glowing faintly beneath his skin. They were always there, dormant, until we activated them through Ellie. A scream echoed through the comms, Ellie's voice. Daniel turned to see the live feed glitch, then show Ellie's hospital room. The bed was empty, the window shattered, and scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood. "Come find us, Daddy," Knox laughed. "Game on, soldier." Daniel's world went red. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a hunt. Daniel's grip tightened on the child in his arms as he stepped into the fluorescent glare of the rescue team's lights. The little girl clung to him, her skeletal fingers digging into his tactical vest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The red veins branching across her skin pulsed faintly just like Ellie's had. Maya's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Knox is secured, but we've got a problem. The hard drive's encrypted. We need Vanessa to—" A gunshot cut her off. Daniel spun just in time to see Vanessa slump against the wall, blood blooming across her chest. Knox stood over her, a smoking pistol in his hand, somehow freed from his restraints. His lips curled into a smile as he raised the gun again, this time toward the children. Daniel moved faster than thought. He shoved the girl behind him and lunged, tackling Knox to the ground. The gun went off the bullet, ricocheting off steel shelves. They grappled Knox's strength unnatural, his eyes wild with fanaticism. "You don't understand." Knox spat his breath reeking of chemicals. The F3 strain was never about immunity, it's evolution. Daniel's fist connected with Knox's jaw once, twice, but the scientist only laughed. Then the child screamed. Daniel turned. The little girl was convulsing, her body arching off the floor. The red veins moved, slithering across her skin to form that same haunting symbol, the one now burning on Daniel's own forearm. Knox wheezed a laugh. "Too late, soldier. The trigger sequence is all ready." A single gunshot silenced him forever. Maya stood over Knox's body, her sidearm smoking. But the damage was done. All around them, the rescued children began to hum a low, resonant vibration that made the lights flicker. Their markings glowed brighter, synchronizing. And from the shadows of the corridor, a familiar small figure stepped forward. Ellie. Her eyes were fully crimson now, her nightgown stained with that same unnatural fluid. But when she spoke, her voice was layered with something ancient and terrible. "We are awake." The facility's alarms wailed as the ground trembled. Steel beams groaned. Somewhere deep below, something stirred. Daniel reached for his daughter, but the moment his fingers brushed her skin, the symbols on his arm ignited searing, white-hot. Visions flooded his mind. A laboratory buried beneath the desert, hundreds of glass tanks, and inside each one a child suspended in red fluid, their eyes open and aware. Ellie's small hand closed around his. "Time to go home, Daddy." The last thing Daniel saw was the ceiling collapsing as the world dissolved into light. The salt-kissed wind carried Ellie's laughter as she twirled on the beach, her sundress fluttering like a flag of surrender, not to fear, but to joy. Daniel watched from the porch, his coffee cooling in hands that no longer trembled. The scars on his forearm itched sometimes, a phantom reminder of the symbols that had once burned there. But the marks were fading now, just like the nightmares. Then the mail came. A single envelope, no return address. Inside, a photograph of a desert facility, its doors blown open. Scrawled across the bottom, Phase 3 complete, subjects unaccounted for. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Ellie called from the shore, her voice bright. "Daddy, look what I found." She held up a seashell unnaturally crimson, its surface etched with a familiar spiral pattern. The coffee cup slipped from Daniel's grip. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a storm gathered. Dark clouds rolled in too fast, too purposeful. The waves began to churn, not with the tide, but with something beneath, a flash of movement, red and slick and alive. Ellie didn't notice. She pressed the shell to her ear, her smile widening. "They're singing again," she whispered. And in that moment, Daniel knew. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. He reached for his daughter as the first thunderclap shook the sky. The shell crumbled to dust in her hands, revealing a tiny metal device, a transmitter. Its light pulsed in time with the scars on Daniel's arm. Somewhere a door opened. Somewhere children who should be dead began to wake. And somewhere closer than either of them realized, Vanessa's voice crackled through a radio. "Bring them home."